And look at that magic. All right, our AV checklist is done. Our standard disclaimer. So routergods is an independent group, not endorsed by Cisco, not paid by Cisco. We're very, very independent. Nothing I say is necessarily that of Cisco, so my statements are independent and just my own personal statements. We're not getting paid for any of this. All the links I post up here are not affiliate links. So what that means is if I post up a Newegg link or I post up an Amazon.com link to something, it's there's no money coming back to me. So that just keeps everyone honest. And then for future meetups, we have our Bangkok boot camp is next month. Yes, I keep on pimping that. It's not going to be pimped out too much longer because basically we're less than, well, actually we're about a month away, a little bit over a month away. We have our Config Con coming up at the week of Cisco Live. We have a 1,700 square foot suite. I think it's on the 34th floor of the Mandalay Bay. So if you can attend that, that'd be great. We have an NSX meetup tomorrow, actually. NSX meetup is tomorrow. We're using the Fuse for that. I need to make the link. We have Firepower ASA, Nexus, UCS, all that good stuff in Glendale. Going to have a planned LinkedIn meetup. I need to schedule that. Might be in the late February. And then we'll talk about some other future meetups as we get further into this particular hackpad. So not going to talk about it now because it won't make sense until 5 minutes later. Okay, the agenda for today. If you guys are fans of sites like Tom's Hardware, AnandTech, HardOCP, I guess even Slashdot, Reddit, Battle Stations, you watch Linus Tech Tips, this is the meetup, the session for you, because we're going to basically do kind of like an abbreviated A plus server plus talking about components, talking about operating systems, virtualization, basically everything you need to do and purchase to build a badass home server. Not a regular server, but a badass server. So no one wants to, I mean, if you're going to build a regular computer, I mean, realistically, you could just go to Costco, buy that Dell off the shelf that's probably $800. You're going to get a monitor. It's probably going to have like 16 gigs of RAM. Actually, from Costco, maybe 8 gigs. You're going to pop in another 8 and you'll be fine. Mute yourself, please. So, that's a regular server. What we want is something better. We want a server that people are going to go, wow, that's really powerful. You can game on it. You can render video on it. You can serve out GNS3 to like 4 people, stuff like that. So a very beefy server. That's our plan. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you guys a hypothetical question that you should think about. I'm going to kind of talk about our plan for this session and for 6 months down the line. And it's going to start to make sense why we're having a lot of these meetups. We're going to talk about the purpose of the session, so why you're in here. Hopefully you know why you're in here, but we'll talk about kind of what we'll cover. Hold on for a second, just starting to mute people. Then we're going to talk about what you should consider before buying, stuff like budget, stuff like do you want a portable server, stuff like power, are you okay with 600 watts of power usage? Are you okay with 32 gigs of RAM? Are you okay with 64 gigs of RAM? What's important to you? And then we'll talk about some little known stuff like checking out the compatibility guides if you plan on using ESXi or other stuff. Then we're deep diving into components. This is kind of our A plus section of it. We'll talk about chassis selection, motherboard, CPU, all that good stuff. Then we'll talk about sample builds. So I've got several sample builds here that I will release out. I need to kind of clean it up so you can, so it will make sense. But right now this is kind of in, it's like 80% done, but we'll kind of go through this. And then we'll have a Q&A throughout, and then we'll end up with like the big Q&A at the end. So hopefully this session lasts about maybe an hour, hour and a half. We'll try to speed through it. Now, it was advertised as building and configuring a badass home server. I'm going to leave the configuring part for later. So this is purely on the purchasing decisions, what to buy, where to buy it from, that type of stuff. And the reason for that is if we get into the configuring part, it's going to be a very, very long meetup. And we'll just save that for another day. Okay? Okay, let's begin with a question here. So imagine yourself, you're in a future job interview. They're interviewing for, let's say, network engineer, like a CCNP level network engineer. And so we have two candidates. We've got candidate A, let's say candidate A on the left side, and then we have you, which is candidate B. So candidate A has got CCNP, right? Maybe you went to, let's say you went to some school, you got CCNP. Let's say 2 years experience somewhere, right? Not at a particular large institution, but he's got 2 years of experience somewhere. So he's cool, 2 years of experience. He's got 2 arms, 2 legs. He's got a nose, 2 eyes. So he's like a normal dude. So he's middle of the road, CCNP, right? So he's hireable. And then you come walking in. You also have CCNP, all right? You also went to school. And let's say you also have the 2 years of experience. Okay, so on this part, you are neck and neck. You both have 2 eyes, 2 arms, all that good stuff. However, you've got something better. When you were going for your CCNP, you were using GNS3. You were using GNS3 inside of ESXi, or maybe it was Unraid, or maybe it was Proxmox, KVM, whatever it was. Maybe all three. Maybe you used all of that stuff. On top of using the GNS3 on top of the ESX, you built your own server. Built server. You priced out all the pieces. You attached some storage on top of that. Maybe you bought a Synology, but if not, you somehow got 4 hard drives with SATA cables. You built a RAID array through software, and you did the storage that way, right? You built your own network. Oh, I should have included that picture, but you went to Costco, you bought the Costco table, then you went to IKEA and you bought that LAC table, and you put the switch over here, you put the router over here. You had some PoE, and you ran it up to the WAP, the wireless access point over here. So you built your own network at home, and maybe you bought some Cisco pieces along the way, right? And let's say you also played with Viral. Right? You can probably see where I'm going with this. In addition to this, your server, you built such a badass server that one day, Jesus, hold on. Mute yourself, please. Hold on. Okay, so going back to that, I'm not going to redraw everything. This was you. Okay, so you built all that, but then you also realized that you have such an awesome server. It's got 64 gigs of RAM, let's say Core i7, it runs at 4 gigahertz. You learned how to take this server, this is your server, you learned how to connect it out to the internet and basically chop up your server into 4 different pieces of GNS3 or Viral or whatever, right? So you learned how to do the router portion, the firewall portion, the switch portion, all of that wonderful stuff. And you learned how to do some scripting and stuff like that, right? So let me ask you this. Who do you think they're going to hire? Are they going to hire plain vanilla CCNP? Or the guy that did CCNP and built all of this stuff on top of that? Who's the better candidate? That's right. You are the better candidate. Does all of this stuff right here, does this kind of look like a data center? The storage, the network, the server piece, the operating systems, right? So that is, you're basically making your own data center. Okay? Not a complete enterprise class data center, but you understand the pieces. You are getting there. Okay, let me ask you this question too. How many of you have never built a computer? Okay, looks like maybe all of you have built a computer, or there's a bunch of you who are scared. Okay, one person is brave enough to say they have not. Okay. Okay. So the thing with not building a computer, you may think this is kind of an archaic idea. Why do I need to build a computer when I can just buy it from Dell or whatever? Let me show you how this adds on top of each other. PC build, right? On top of the PC build is the OS install. Okay, so if you don't know how to build a PC, you're most likely also going to run into this. You don't have that much. You don't have that much skill in installing operating systems. These two kind of build on top of each other. If you want to get ahead in IT, if you want to get like really decent jobs, you need to be not afraid of just walking up to any of your computers and completely blowing away the OS without any problems. And that confidence comes from doing this install a lot of times and building a PC. You need to have the confidence to basically say, if you took a hammer to any one of your computers, okay, it's going to cost some money, but you can immediately go to Newegg, price out all the components, and within the next day have a PC built and an OS ready to go. These skills translate into job skills. And of course, they could come up in interviews and stuff like that. But it's kind of like it's one of these basic things like not knowing how to swim or stuff like that. And it really shows when a network person has never built a computer, never installed an OS, never played with virtualization, right? All this type of stuff. And also on all of this is the planning portion. Planning portion is a big thing. How long is it going to take you to build a PC? How much is it going to take? The parts and all that. This is what separates the what we call the config monkey versus the senior engineer or the director, management, that type of stuff. This is where you kind of separate the 60 to the 80K, and here we get into the 100 plus K, right? Anyone can config. It's not a big deal. It takes us kind of a special different person to plan, okay? So that's our plan, or that's our question. That was the answer. Here's the plan. The plan is, today, we're teaching how to build a PC server, right? This is the building part. Where we want to get to at the end is we want to get to remote labs for all routergods members and a set of remote labs. So let's say 4 routergods members have stepped up to the plate. They've built their own computers, they've networked them together, and now what we have is a single web page where whatever lab you click into, it will fire in to the appropriate person's lab, and you can start labbing. Maybe they're hooked together through some crazy GRE network, GRE tunnel, but this is what we're looking at. A single web page you can go to, you click on it, you're going to be fired into this guy's lab. Maybe tomorrow you want to be fired into that guy's lab, you click another line, and there you go. Reverse timelining it, how do we get there? Well, we're going to need to have meetups along the way. Configuring the server. We need to have ESX for the people who want to use ESXi. We're going to need to have best practices for ESXi. Some of you want to use Proxmox or KVM. And if you don't know what those are, that's fine. We're going to have meetups about that. Some of you guys want to use Unraid, right? So that's the configuring portion of it. And then next week, you probably noticed that we're kind of doing this slightly backwards. We're going to have a meeting about how to share your network connection, share the server to the internet. So this is a way of planning, is you start with the end in mind, which is our remote labs. What are all the steps we need to do along the way to get there? So we're doing this step 1, building the PC. So what that means is we have ESX coming up. I need to schedule it. We're going to do a Proxmox KVM session. We're going to do an Unraid session. That's going to be pretty fun. We're not going to do Hyper-V, screw them, and we're not going to do Zen Server or anything like that. But we'll kind of pick like the three coolest ones in my view, and then we'll also pick the easy one, which is the Windows 10 with the workstation, the VMware workstation. Okay, so that's kind of the overview right there. Okay, reverse timelines, future meetups, we already talked about that. All right, so before you build your server, you got to ask yourself a couple questions. What is the server being used for? Now, kind of a simple question, right? But, are you going to play games? And it's completely fine if you want to play games. You're in IT. It's expected that you play games. You can get jobs by playing games. I got one of my jobs because I didn't get the job because I played World of Warcraft, but I knew that when we started talking about World of Warcraft, I was in because everyone else in the room played World of Warcraft. You will be amazed how this happens. Call of Duty. A lot of people play Call of Duty. A lot of people, especially in certain logistical high-end jobs, play EVE Online. So it's kind of like golf. Golf for normal people, games for IT people. Uh, Games is fine, completely okay. Do you want to do video editing? Video editing, video rendering, right? That's another use case. So games, video editing, that's fine. Of course, if you're in this group, you're probably interested in something like GNS3 viral, right? That's okay, right? So you need to decide what your server is being used for. Do you want to learn about Linux? Do you want to learn about VMware? Right? So all of these things, you have to decide what you are using this server for. It could be all of the above, which is fine. I think for most of the people in here, you probably want to buy a single computer that does all of the above. So it's just completely overpowered for everything, because you don't want to, you're probably not like me where you have 5 computers sitting on a shelf for specialized uses. But we'll talk about that for later. So we're going to kind of approach it from that point where you just want one big, not necessarily big in size, but big in power server. Please mute yourself. Hold on, folks. Okay. So we're talking about labbing the GNS3, the viral. Also, you have to consider, are you going to share your connection? So are you going to share it? If you're deciding, if you just want this for yourself, you don't need anything as beefy. So the options I'm going to give you, you can probably stop at 16 to 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's not a big deal, right? If you're just for yourself, 16 to 32, just fine. And actually, most of the time, if you're not going for CCIe, 16 gigs of RAM, completely cool, right? Once you start going for CCIe or you start sharing your labs, start looking at 32 gigs and above, and we'll talk about that. You also have to think about operating systems. Do you want to, we talked about the Linux, are you okay with just sticking with Windows? Doesn't really, it does sort of matter what operating system you pick, but I think it's completely fine, a completely viable option just to use Windows and throw VMware Workstation on it. Absolutely okay. Okay. I'm going to stop here for about 30 seconds or so. Anyone have questions about the purpose? Asking yourself why you're building the server. You're going to write down 3 or 4 things of what you want to do, and questions about the, kind of that job candidate between job candidate A and job candidate B with all that other experience on top. Questions about that, and also of our agenda. Okay, so people are asking Mac OS. So how are we going to build a Mac OS? You just go to the store and you buy it. There's really no build out there. And also you have a problem. A lot of the like the MacBooks, you're going to max out at 16 gigs. You know, it can be done, but we're kind of sticking with PCs on this one. Okay, so we have a question. Do you add that experience in your resume or mention it during the interview? Of course you mention it in the interview. If you don't mention it in the interview, they're not going to know. So you gotta put that stuff in there. Okay? So when you build your server, and that's another thing, you are let's say for any computer job, any IT job, if you have 10 candidates, most likely I would say generally speaking, maybe two of them, one to two of them have built their own computer. Vast majority have never built their computer, right? And so you can very easily find this out. Of course, you say, "Hey, I've built my own computer," and if the interviewer has also built their own computer, they will know how to ask you certain questions. So how did you price everything out? What website did you go to? Did you buy everything through Amazon.com? Did you use Newegg? What why did you buy this particular piece? You know, so a good interviewer should be able to ask you decent questions. Why'd you pick that motherboard? Why'd you pick that video card? Okay, continuing on. Okay, so now that you know the purpose of the server, let's say you want a game. I'll give you my personal example. My personal example is I need something to run GNS3 Labs for 6 people. That is my top priority. My second priority is video editing for Bangkok Motor Show, video editing and rendering for BKK, right? I am going to game a little bit on it, but not too much. And I want to do stuff like ESXi unraid on it. So that's kind of my goals. Maybe later on I'll throw viral in there, but it's not really. Yeah, I guess we'll just put it there. So that's the purpose of my most recent computer, the shuttle computer. We're going to run GNS3 Labs on it or viral for 6 people. It's going to be video editing, a little bit of gaming, and ESX and unraid. Okay. So that's the purpose. After you decide on your purpose, what is important to you? And the thing we're going to kind of tie both of these together is your budget. For a lot of you, the budget is very important. I've seen people say, okay, what's the best thing I can get for under $500? That's gonna you're not going to get very much server on that unless you find just a smoking deal on eBay. Okay? If you really want to get a badass server, not including the monitor and the video card and all that, but you can get one in the neighborhood of $1,200 to $1,500 if you build it yourself. This recent one, it's probably going to end up costing about $1,400, and this is with 64 gigs of RAM, Core i7 Skylake. I do a lot of modifications to it, so I could have gotten it on the low end of 1,200, but I just threw in more modifications on there. Okay. So cost, yes, you can get it for under 1,000, but if you're really going to use this for CCIE level stuff and you're going to share it out to other people, you're kind of looking at the high end of $1,400 to $1,500. Now, of course, you could go completely sky high by going like 128 gigs and stuff like that, and I'll have the build out cost for you a little bit later. CPU. CPU speeds. Thankfully, right now we have Core i7 Skylake. Very good chips, 4 gigahertz, and they turbo up, I believe, to 4.2. They have all the virtualization features in there. So also, I forgot to add, is you should always be checking Intel Arc. I'll put that under the CPU section. If you don't know about Intel Arc, shame on you. I'll just put a note down here, Intel Arc. So Intel Arc, well, we might as well go there now. Intel Arc. So arc.intel.com. This is the page for all the processors. And if you click on i7, let's click on the 6700K, which is kind of the most badass model right now. You scroll down, all the way down to advanced technologies, you are going to see this all the virtualization stuff. So especially you're looking at VTX, VTD. Those are probably the two most important things. You're looking for a yes. The VTD is pretty, that's a pretty fun one. It lets you pass through the peripherals directly into the VM. So for those of you guys who saw the latest, or one of the latest Linus Tech Tips, what this means is you could build a server. So we'll put our server here, and you can plug in, let's say, 4 video cards, and we're going to pass through these video cards to a VM. So 4 video cards, 4 VMs, so 1 video card is dedicated to each VM. Now you're probably wondering, why would I do this? Well, let me show you. Each one of these video cards is connected to a different monitor. You're on the same table, right? So you have a TV here, a TV here, TV here, right? So you do that. And on top of that, assuming you have enough USB ports, you're going to connect USB ports to a keyboard and mouse. So you're probably seeing where I'm going with this. So you're going to snake out for each section a keyboard and mouse, and that passes through to the VM as well. And now you can have 4 gaming computers or 4 labbing sessions off of one computer. That is what this will help you do. Directed I/O. Okay. If you buy a modern chip made within the last year or two, it will have that. If it's Intel chip. Don't know about AMD. I would assume probably, but this will definitely have it. Okay. Now, this is kind of a crazy setup here because with the 4 video cards, most of the time if you're sharing a lab, this is kind of what you're going to do. You're going to have the server. You're going to connect it to some switch. And you can get a gigabit switch right now for like $40, like a TrendNet gigabit switch. And then have everyone else on laptops and do it that way. That's another way to do it. This is exactly the way we do it in Bangkok. We get a switch, everyone connects, and we're off and running. Hold on for a second. I keep having to mute people. Okay, CPU speeds and cores. If you're just doing this for yourself, quad core, 4 core, hyper-threading with HT, perfectly fine for 90% of you guys. If you're, so this is for you as the individual. If you're planning on sharing labs, in our experience, if you have a 4 core with hyper-threading, you can share up to 3 to 4 people is pretty okay. Is not too bad. Depending on the gigahertz of your processor, 3 to 4 people usually not a problem. You could probably bump it up to 6 if you push it. After that, you may want to start looking at 6 core, 8 core type deals. But for vast majority of people, 4 core is just fine. Also for storage, these days SSDs are out there, regular hard drives are out there. I recommend to people, if you can afford it, go for the SSD. 512 gig SSD is probably okay, unless you we'll start talking about virtualization stuff. But 512, even a 256 gig SSD is probably good for most cases. Questions about deciding on the purpose of the server and deciding on what's important, having a budget, and we talked a little bit about Intel Arc, and we said that 4 cores, modern processor 4 cores is probably going to be okay for most of the stuff you do today. Okay, we have a question from Matt. Does the Xeon architecture offer any benefit over the Core i7? Yes. The main benefit of the Xeon will be the maximum amount of RAM. So if you look at the Skylake i7s, actually we could just click here. Okay, so if we're looking at the Skylake 6700K, this is the most modern i7. If we scroll down, you're going to see something. Maximum memory size is 64 gigs. That's it. Well, not that's it, but 64 gigs is pretty good. For most people, it's all right. But if you're going to be doing like really, really crazy stuff and you want to go up to 128 gigs, you cannot use the Skylake Core i7. You can either go Xeon, but not all Xeons go up to 128. There are Xeons that stop at 64, so you have to be careful. Intel Arc will show you. The Xeon D will go up to 128, but we'll talk about that, and that's kind of pricey. Okay, so Jamil says, can't you already put an insane amount? Probably going to have to be more specific about that. Alex says, will the Xeon consume more electricity than the i7 chips? Actually, they will consume less because the unknown fact that people don't realize is a lot of ways the modern Xeon Skylake chips is basically the regular Skylake chip with the graphics processor chopped off or disabled. So if you're okay with 64 gigs of RAM, which, I mean, unless you're doing something insane, 64 gigs, if you hit the top of 64 gigs, I would buy another one and cluster it. But, you know, so this is the problem people do. They buy a machine with 128 gigs of RAM. They spend like $2,500 on the RAM. And you find out that the most you ever use is like 40 gigs. So it's kind of a waste. And nothing stops you from buying half the RAM, like let's say 32 gigs, and you kind of wait a little bit, and then you could buy the other half to fill out the slots. Okay, now before you buy everything, decide on a budget. Say, okay, I'm looking to do everything 1,500 is kind of like my budget, right? So decide on a budget. You're also going to be looking, while you're looking at parts, I gave you links to VMware compatibility guide and the Proxmox Debian compatibility guide. Proxmox is based on Debian, so it should be the same. And then I'll look up the Unraid one and paste it in there. Very important because if you start buying stuff and you plan on doing VMware, it's kind of helpful to know what network cards will work with ESXi 6, right? Or what motherboards will work with it, or what processors will work for it. It's very, very important. Okay, questions about the compatibility guides or the budget? Okay, so another question people have is, are you going to virtualize or not? Are you going to, you got two options here. You can go the easy way or the hard way. So this is the easy way and the hard way. Hard is relative. It's not that hard, but it's harder than easy. Easy way. You install Windows like normal on whatever server. And then inside of Windows, you're going to install a VMware workstation. Don't do player, do VMware workstation. Don't do VirtualBox, VMware workstation. Okay, so that's the easy way. And then inside of VMware workstation, you can play with whatever hell you want, right? And then for GNS3, you could just run GNS3 right inside of Windows if you want. Or I guess you could do some stuff inside of VMware workstation. So that's fine. A lot of people do this. Completely okay. Now what you're going to lose here is you're going to lose the fun and the joy of playing around with ESXi. And it's actually kind of cool to play with ESXi. Now, You can do this inside of VMware Workstation. You can double up on the virtualization. In fact, if you Google for AutoLab, the vSphere AutoLab, that's exactly what this is. This is a file you download, you uncompress it into VMware Workstation, and it's like a complete vSphere lab in one deal. So you could do that. So that's the easy mode. The hard mode would be you're going to do ESXi or ESXi or some type of KVM Proxmox, or you're going to do Unraid. And Unraid is really KVM with like a nice menu system and some other features fitted in. Now, the reason this is hard mode is you're going to need another computer to kind of look up things on the internet. So I'm assuming that you have some type of laptop or another PC already set up, and you're going to be remote controlling into there. So that's why it's a little bit more difficult. We can call this headless, is usually how this is going to go. Okay, just kind of looking at the questions here. So GNS3 is virtualization software. It is, actually. So what do you think it's doing when you start up that router? So in GNS3, so let's say this is Windows. Inside of Windows, you run GNS3. When you drag let's say the 7200 router, it's using a program called Dynamips as your emulation. You can kind of you can almost think of Dynamips as like a VMware. It's analogous. And inside of Dynamips, that is running the 7200 image. Okay, so that's if you run the local server. If you run the VMware server, then what happens here is this is Windows. You're going to run VMware Workstation. Okay, so this is another box. You're going to run GNS3 inside of Windows, and GNS3 is going to talk to the GNS3 VM inside of VMware Workstation. Why would they do this? Well, this is a controlled environment where they know all the hardware and everything, so it's very easy to add stuff in here. Okay, Sylvester has a question. Did you mention whether to go with tower rack mount, which is cheaper? We'll get to that in the chassis portion. Why VMware and not VirtualBox? We don't run VMbox. Probably meant VirtualBox. Most of the corporate world out there runs VMware or KVM. Very few people run VirtualBox other than hobbies, and you have a performance hit with VirtualBox. And it's owned by Oracle. Okay. Just quickly, Unraid is free to try. So it's free, and it's free for up to 3 drives. So you can mess with it for 3 drives, and after that, I think it's something like $70 for the license. You want to add more drives. We're going to have a separate meetup about that. For ESXi, this is free, and then at the 60-day mark, you just have to register and get like your free license. Or you can join VMUG, which is the user group, pay $200, and you get a 365-day license for all the VMware suite, or most of the VMware suite. KVM Proxmox, free. Like free as in really free. Okay. Now, if you don't want to build a server, that's completely fine. You're scared. You don't want to build a server. It's icky. You don't want to shove cards into PCI slots. You don't want a seat memory in there. I understand. You're gutless. So what you can do is you can go on eBay, and there's lots and lots of servers around. And the reason for lots and lots of servers is big companies like Facebook are upgrading. It's called a refresh. They're refreshing their servers. So basically, they're taking a rack of servers. And so let's say this is like 3 years ago that they bought it. and they're upgrading this to the latest stuff. So what happens here is the power of like this section, when it's upgraded to modern stuff, is you can just junk all of the rest of the stuff. So I've seen this cycle repeated over and over where the new technology, new family of CPUs comes out. You will basically see corridors filled with old servers, basically ready to be sent out and sold. Hold on, folks. Let me start muting people. Okay, so what do you look for on an eBay server? You're looking for cores, you're looking for price. You should be very careful with the memory and the drives, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So let's say we go on eBay and we start looking for servers. Okay, now you could do like a Dell PowerEdge. You could type in the name itself. You could do like a Xeon server. Hold on for a second. So let's type in Xeon server. So you can see like a Dell PowerEdge here. What you're looking for is a couple things. You're looking at the processor family. If you buy too far back, so if you buy more than 2 or 3 years back, you really need to check Intel Arc to see if it supports VTD. If you don't, and you decide to run viral on it, you may have a problem because it can't do the virtualization inside of virtualization, like double virtualization. Think of the matrix inside of the matrix, or maybe Inception, right? So you need to look on Intel Arc, look for VTD. And you're also looking for RAM. So here's a quad core, it's like, let's see, 2 procs, I think, and 32 gigs, PERC 5. So it comes with the RAID card. It's kind of an okay deal. What you should be looking for is the rating of the person. So let's see, let's click on this guy. Let's just kind of see right here. So if you look at his rating, 20,475. Jesus Christ, this guy's pretty good. It's got a nice little medal right there, a star. The sales ends in 4 hours. You're also looking at how many are available. So this guy has a crap ton of servers. Look right there. More than 10 available. He sold 233. So most likely this was like a massive buy from like a Facebook or a hosting provider or something like that. So just make sure you read through the whole details. Like for 143 right now, I might go for it. Look up the power usage though, and just make sure this is like a server that you can go for. Also you're going to look here, memory installed. You can see it says 8 slots available. They popped in 32, so it's 8 times 4. So you want to look up the maximum amount of RAM on that. You also want to look up the type of RAM as well. Okay, so eBay is definitely good. Now, if you need tricks about eBay, there's one website I love going to. It's let's see here if I can get to it. Hold on. It's called Serve the Home. Whoops, server no. There we go. ServeTheHome.com. So ServeTheHome.com, it's basically one step up from Tom's Hardware. Tom's Hardware is consumer. Serve the Home is like home servers, so it's like geek level. And on the right hand side, they kind of watch like the most popular eBay auctions, what they think are good deals. So processors, servers, that type of stuff. So here you can see, let's click on this guy right here. Usually it's processors. So these are 2 Xeon 5680s hex core, so 6 core. Ooh. And for Dell PowerEdge. So basically you'd find a Dell PowerEdge, maybe with no processors, and then you're going to put them together. So you can get really good deals with eBay. If you're brave, you can try out Craigslist, but always remember with Craigslist, meet in like a police station lobby or parking lot or something like that so you don't get robbed. Okay, questions about buying stuff through eBay. You just have to be careful. Remember to look at Intel Arc on the CPUs. Look at the power usage. Anything that is 1U is going to probably suck a lot of power, and noise. You're not going to put this in the bedroom. Someone will kill you if you put it in the bedroom. So the noise of a rack mount server for a data center is insanely loud, especially on boot up time. So you're going to have a huge drawback on that. I mean, it's meant to be placed in a data center, but a lot of times you can find prices for cheap. Now, another option that you have, because eBay is kind of older stuff, you can basically price out on Dell. You can go the workstation route. Now, a workstation is basically a really beefy desktop computer. Now, this is, I just priced it out really quick. It's a Dell Precision 3000. You can see it's like $2,000, not a big deal. I put in a Xeon in there, and I popped in 64 gigs of RAM. So $2,000, brand new. You know, I personally would not do this. I think I can build a much better server for cheaper, but it does have like a Quadro, like a somewhat okay graphics card in there. Okay. And of course, you would get support. You don't need to build it. So if you think building a computer is kind of icky, then this is a viable alternative. Oh yeah, with rack mount servers, depending on the size of the rack mount server, you may have a big problem with power, especially if on boot up you're pulling down 800 watts, 1500 watts, whatever it is. So you may need to check your breakers and your circuit. But heat will also be an issue because the room's going to heat up very nicely. And for those of you guys who don't know what U means, so when we say 1U, 1U, 2U, these are measurements of height. So when you rack something, a 1U server is those really thin ones. I think it's what, one and a quarter, 1.5. I don't remember what the exact height is, but it's one something. I think it is high. And then when you do 2U, it's basically double that. 4U is 4, and you get the picture. So usually 1U servers, 1U is just freaking loud. I generally go for like 2U servers are fine. 4U is getting up there. They're heavy. They're very difficult to lug around, but they're okay. Another thing you can sometimes find is something called half depth servers. So it could be 1U, but if it's 1U half depth, what that means is if we look at the rack from the side, let's see if I can draw this 3D here. Hey, look at that. Okay. So let's say this is the front of the rack and these are the sides. Half depth means it kind of stops here. You'll find a lot of these with the Intel Atom processors. So Intel Atom, I mean, if you can get one for like sub $100, hey, go for it. Just to have like a throwdown computer. But I wouldn't use it for anything like GNS3 or something. Yeah, 1U 1.75. Okay, so eBay, Dell is okay. You can even you can even go completely crazy like some people and get like a laptop with 32 gigs of RAM or 64 gigs of RAM. It's fine. The laptop we're doing this presentation on, this has 24 gigs of RAM. So I run VMware Workstation on it just fine. Okay, let's deep dive into some components or questions about eBay. All right, continuing on. let's talk about components. This is going to be fun. Okay, the first thing I look at is form factor, the chassis. Do I want to carry this around? Do I want this somewhat portable? Am I going to put it on a desk? Is it going to be a massive tower? So portability, portable. Hard drive bays, that's another thing I look at. Number of fan slots, all that good stuff. Right? So in terms of chassis, we have a couple things we can go for here. The one I recommend, so if you feel a little intimidated building a computer from scratch, and that's okay, then what you can do is you can kind of go halfway. You can go with what's called a bare bones system. And what a bare bones system lets you do is, hold on for a second. A bare bones system lets you, it's a case with a motherboard already installed. So all you need to do is pop in the memory, some drives, and a CPU, and you are good to go. So let me go to a shuttle computer here. And this is one I have sitting on my desk right now. So let's see, shuttle, let's go shuttle. Okay, so shuttle's been around for a long time, and this is the current version right here. It's, how big would I describe it? Like a really fat loaf of bread. That's kind of the size right here. But you see, it's kind of like a cube. In the back, you have your connections. We've got several USB 3 ports. We got a single Ethernet port. Got a little heat pipe system, HDMI, 2 display ports, all that good stuff. So it's the case and the motherboard in there. So this is what you get. So what you're going to do is you're going to buy a CPU, you're going to buy the RAM, and you're going to buy the drives. And if you want, you can buy another video card, but it does video built in. So you could chuck in here 64 gigs of RAM. You don't need to buy a fan because this is a heat pipe system. So you put in the CPU, that little contraption conducts the heat away, and the actual fan is at the back. So it's kind of a cool setup there. Up top, you have a 5 1/4 bay. You also have a tray that you could put in that fits 3.5 drives and get some accessories to fit other stuff. So this is what I recommend. It's kind of the perfect blend of portability and power. You can put this, you can buy a strap for it and carry it around. And as I said, 64 gigs should be quite good for most people. Just looking at some questions on here. Could you touch on the Intel NUC? We will later. Can you put in a 6 SATA drive bay? So what we did, I showed people yesterday about it. Click here. This is a couple sample builds that we have. IC dock. Okay, so a company called IC Dock makes this crazy contraption. Let me find the 8. We'll just go batshit crazy here. So most people today do not use the 5 1/4 bay. They use a I don't remember the last time I used a CD or DVD drive. So most computers, they have that spot in there. So what you could do is you could take the plate off that spot, or take out the CD drive or the DVD drive since you're not using it, and you can replace it with this puppy right here. What this does is it fits in the same spot, and it will give you 8, depending on the model. You can get the one with 8, which is what you see here. You can get the one with 6, which is the one I have, or 4. And you can put laptop drives, the small laptop drives, or SSDs in here. So you can get a hell of a lot more drives, and you can see the back is kind of cool. The back has like a little fan, and all the ports go out there. And you only need 1 or 2 power connectors, and it'll power the whole thing. So you don't need a power connector for each drive, because that would just suck. So this is a very good thing. Now on the shuttle, you have a problem. You can't use the 8 really, because on the motherboard itself, there are 4 SATA ports. 4 SATA ports. So you you need to get either the 4 port one, the 4 bay one, or the 6 bay one. Now the reason I got the 6 bay one, what the hell? Okay guys, remember to mute yourselves. Okay. So the reason I bought the 6 port or the 6 bay one is because after the Bangkok Motor Show, when I come back to the US with my shuttle, I'm going to take the bay out and put it in my desktop, which has a lot more SATA ports. So you can get motherboards with 6 ports and 8 ports. I think like the Xeon D motherboards have 8 SATA ports. So you can go completely crazy on that. Yes, there is a mute all feature in Meeting Center, but as they join, they're not muted. Okay, questions about the shuttle. We'll talk more about the shuttle a little bit later, but this is the kind of a small form factor computer. You can get even smaller with the Intel NUC. We'll price out the Intel NUC. Do I have the pricing here? I don't. Oh yeah, I do. So we'll talk about that later. So chassis, very, very important. You're looking at the CPU. I'll make your life easy. Core i7 Skylake or Xeon Skylake. Be done with it. At least 4 cores if you can get, if you have the money to get like, well, if you have money to get like a 14 core Xeon, then do it. But I'm going to kind of suspect that most of you do not have that type of money. Okay, motherboards. Brand of motherboards, it really, I mean, Asus, Gigabyte, they're all fine. Supermicro is fine. You don't need to get a multi-socket motherboard. A lot of people want like 2-socket motherboards. You don't need to go through that pain. But what you're looking for is ports. Specifically, these guys right here. USB 3 ports, enough SATA ports, SATA 3 ports for drives. If you're going to be putting a lot of drives in here, lots of SATA 3 ports. And the M2 port. Ooh, the M2 port. The M2 port lets you put in guys like this. This guy right here is basically the next generation of SSDs. Actually, the M2 slot's been around for a little bit, but that's a that's a 512 gig puppy right there. I've got a 256 gig one in the shuttle. It's a lot smaller. It's like a stick of gum basically, and it does cost a little bit more, but you save so much space. And these guys are fast. If you look up the stats on this, I'll have it a little bit later, but it's mind-boggling how fast these drives are. Okay, so that's what you're looking at for motherboards. Ports, SATA, M2. Brand, as long as it's not something like BioStar or something like that, then you'll probably be okay. I've had good luck with ASRock, is pretty good. Now, of course, for motherboards, if you bought the shuttle, you don't need to worry about the motherboard. The motherboard's already built in. Yeah, Asus is fine too. Okay, RAM. As we said, 1632 gigs should work for most people. If you're sharing, then think about 64 or 128. But do realize as you put more RAM in, it's going to cost a lot of money. So RAM, I mean, I priced out something today on a couple UCS servers, and RAM alone was like 200K. Now they wanted a lot of RAM, but yeah, 200K for RAM itself is kind of crazy. People always ask, does speed really matter? Should I pay the premium on speed? Is DDR4 faster than DDR3? Actually, not really. For most of the stuff you do, DDR4 is not faster than DDR3. The main difference between 4 and 3 is a couple things. Power usage is a little bit less. The voltage is a little bit lower. But the big thing is capacity. You can get sticks of DDR4 RAM. You can get 16 gig sticks for significantly cheaper than DDR3 16 gig sticks. And I'll show you that in a couple minutes when we look through the sample builds. Questions about RAM or the motherboard? Okay, we have a question. Isn't the free version of ESXi limited to 32 gigs RAM? There used to be a RAM limit on ESXi, not anymore. I'm pretty sure there is not. Okay, let's talk about storage. One thing you need to think about is the difference between local storage and offsetting to a NAS or somewhere else. So if you're going to build a computer, let's say this is your PC, if you want to have your drives here locally, then what you're looking at is probably SSDs in combination with HDs maybe. Or you could just do like a bunch of beefy SSDs and you'll be fine. Another option is you get something like a Synology box, Synology, which is what I have. You could get like a QNAP. You can get like, you could build your own. You could do a free NAS. So this is going to be your storage. You put hard drives in it, and this is going to be your PC. So the beauty of this is for your PC, you don't need to buy as many hard drives. You just put like an M2 128 gig in there and be done with it. And then all your important files go up to the NAS. This is more in the like a data center real life type of environment, but you're going to have an added cost because you're going to need to put a switch. You're going to need to learn how to run cables and play with MTU and all this good stuff. And you're going to find that this setup right here, unless you go 10 gig, and 10 gig at home is kind of funny, but 10 gigabit, unless you go 10 gigabit, this local storage with SSDs is going to destroy the transfer rate on any type of NAS. I mean, unless you're running a freaking NetApp at home, which you're probably not, but or like a Nimble or a Pure Storage or some like Nutanix at home or something. But an SSD locally should almost always beat any type of remote storage. But you do have a safety problem here. If anything happens to that computer, something funky with the motherboard or the SSD, if it's not rated or mirrored or anything like that, then you'll be in trouble with the data. So always think about that type of stuff. Okay, so we have a question. Let's see. QNAP or Synology? Either one's okay. I have a Synology. Other people like QNAP. Now, I will tell you that QNAP did come up with a batshit crazy thing at CES. So QNAP, you can search for it on their webpage, or it's on Tom's Hardware and Nantech or something like that. So they have this box that's coming up. You can put 4 of these, 4 M2s. And I think you can rate it out, or else there's kind of no point if you can't rate it out. So you can take 4 M2s drives in this nice little box, and on top of that, see if that's all it did, that would be fine. But on top of that, they put a 5-port switch in here. Now, of course, it's 1 gig. I mean, so yeah, you're going to outstrip that port, but or all the ports. So it's like a 5-port switch. So don't know exactly when that's actually going to be out, but you're going to see NAS drives transitioning to smaller form factors like that. So we have a question. You can get an 8-port 10G Netgear switch for a couple $100. Yeah, and then you'll have to buy network cards and all that good stuff. So Jamil says, what would be the bottleneck? It depends on the bottleneck. So let's say you're running your server and you're running ESXi, and you've got this connected to your NAS, and this is 1G. When you're booting VMs off the NAS, it's going to be kind of painful because that 1 gig link is somewhere in like a best day scenario. That's actually megabytes per second, right? So 110 megabytes per second, and your IOPS are going to be kind of low as well. Now, if you look at the IOPS on an SSD, like the M2, let's go down here to component prices. So we have an M2 that I spec'd out through Newegg. You can see right here that the transfer rate is 500, actually the top one here, the crazy one, the 950 Pro, 2200 megabytes per second. That's a read, and the write is 900, and your IOPS is 270K, right? So just the transfer speed is just going to be insane if you're booting off like a local SSD versus some type of SAN storage, SAN or NAS, remote storage. The reason I have a Synology is I have terabytes of files that need to be safe, so I trade speed for speed for safety. So Jamil asks, so essentially SSDs are best mounted on the motherboard directly instead of having them on a separate storage device. You can have them on a separate storage device, they'll just be faster than the network. So Alex says, how do you back all this up to cloud? I back it up to the Synology. Synology is in my case, my Synology box is the backup of last resort. So if everything burns down, if the apartment burns down, I'm kind of screwed. So we have a question, am I planning to build a super server for the Router Gods community? No, actually I'm not. I'm teaching you guys how to build a super server so you guys can provide servers for the Router Gods community, and then eventually we'll be able to hook them together for a cluster. Okay, questions about storage and RAM. Okay, let's take a look. Let's talk a little bit about the shuttle. Let's actually go through. I put a link down here, video.newegg.com. This walks you through a complete build of a computer. It's very helpful. There are others on YouTube that you could probably find out. So let's show you some build comparisons here. So this isn't complete yet, but what I kind of built out here are the different models of computers that I have seen and built. I've built the shuttle, I've built multiple shuttles, I've put in the maximum amount of RAM here. I've built the Intel NUCs. There are upcoming Intel NUCs that can be upgraded to 32 gigs of RAM, which is kind of cool. Storage and all that good stuff. Right? And so you can see I put in a link for component prices, and I'll share this out later on, but I have a tab for component prices. So I price out like all the RAM, all the storage, regular hard drives, big hard drives, motherboards, that type of stuff. And then we go through sample builds like the shuttle. So here's my shuttle build. This is actually my exact shuttle build. And I give multiple options for each build. So the most expensive build, the insane build, the storage build, all that good stuff. So this is option 1 is mine. So you can see it costs about $1,300. So this is with 64 gigs RAM, the Skylake, and the M2 drive. $1,300. It's not too bad. Doc will be shared soon. Now, when you're buying a shuttle, I recommend a couple accessories. You don't have to get them, but I really, really, really recommend that you get them. First of all, the shuttle power supply is only, it's either 250 or 300 watts. I forget which one. So your Skylake is taking 95 watts, your motherboard maybe 30 watts. So you don't really have that much room to play around with. So you can put in a graphics card, but it won't be that beefy until you hit your power ceiling. So replacing the power supply with the 500 watter lets you put in a good good video card if you want to game with it. So that's something to think about. I also recommend the 2.5-inch drive tray. This lets you put in the SSDs, because normally you get the tray that fits 3.5-inch drives, which is not going to help you with the SSD. So you're going to need to spend $18 for the other one. Also, the other like almost essential replacement is the fan for the heat pipe in the back of the shuttle. It's noisy as fuck. So replace that with the Noctua 92mm fan, and you won't want to kill someone after 10 minutes. So when it spins up, that fan gets kind of annoying for whatever reason. So this in the upper left corner is my current build. You can see it's about $1,300. Right? If you include all the accessories, let's call it $1,400. Now I have another build when I come back from so down here we call this the WTF build. So this the WTF build, pretty much the same thing, except we have the IC dock with 4 2 TB spin point drives. So when we use something called Unraid, we'll be able to have 6 terabytes of usable space, local storage, not going out to the internet or the network or anything like that. Well, if you look over here, I do have an option for the 7200 RPM drives. So just playing around with the numbers. So here is the slightly less usable space, but we're using 7200 RPM drives. One unfortunate thing about Unraid, you're probably asking yourself, why don't I use 4 SSDs? Unraid right now does not let you use SSDs as the main storage array. It does let you use SSDs for the caching, but not the mass storage itself. Okay, so that's a shuttle. You can see kind of the amount of money you're looking at, which is it's not too bad. Questions about the shuttle build? If you're not gaming, the built-in graphics on the Skylake will be absolutely fine. It can run 4K video, no problem. Okay, we have another build here. Now this is just for reference. I don't recommend people get the DS81. This is the really small, like paperback sized one. We used this for the last time Bangkok Boot Camp last year. The maximum RAM on this is 16 gigs. So you can see you can build it for really cheap, but it only has 16 gigs of RAM. So we're looking at like $630 here. And this is with the Core i7 4790. So this is 2 generations back. Two generations back. It's actually a pretty good chip. It's still like a really decent chip. And we popped in like a M2 drive. So, I mean, I still have it. It's in my room. I mean, it's like 5 feet behind me. And I like blow it away from time to time, and I'll put in like ESXi or Proxmox or whatever, just for the hell of it. Then we have the Intel NUC. The Intel NUC is a little bit more expensive. This is the last generation, which is the Broadwell chip. The Skylake chips are coming out now. You can get them. You can get them now. They're kind of pricey, but the cool thing is you can put 32 gigs of RAM in them, and you can put an M2 card. So if 32 gigs is fine, freaking A, get the Intel NUC, and you can even mount it to the back of your monitor. It's got a VESA mount, and it doesn't take up any desk space, and it works just fine. It's not the speediest computer around, but because it's using the ultra low power Intel chips. The regular shuttle can power three monitors by just built in, but I would suggest if you're powering 3 like 4K monitors, you're going to get a video card to do that. And then we have the Xeon D build. The Xeon D is a crazy 8-core, 16 hyper-threaded chip. I haven't actually personally played with it, but a lot of people have. They love it. The only problem is you can't find the damn thing, and it's really, really, really expensive. The only way you're going to get this chip is already pre-soldered, or not pre-soldered, but it's already attached to the motherboard. So it comes as a combo, which kind of drives up the price. And you can see right here, if you go for like the 128 gig version of this guy, like a desktop Xeon D, use the Antec. You can see right here the motherboard with the CPU. That's at $829 for a motherboard and CPU. It's kind of pricey. After you put in your fan and your ECC memory and your M2, you're looking at $2,400. So there is a very expensive option there. So we have a question from Abram. Is there advantage to put a separate page cache on another M2? If you have enough memory, you really shouldn't hit page cache. At least I don't think so. Your M2s are fast enough to where I don't think it's going to matter if you put it on another M2. But actually, a lot of motherboards only come with one M2 slot. So yeah, you're not going to find a motherboard that, not too many motherboards that I know that have multiple M2 slots, but maybe we can find one. I mean, you're not going to outstrip, if we go back to that Samsung, let's see, I don't think you can outstrip 270k IOPS and read and 85k IOPS write, along with 2200 megabytes transfer speed. Okay, and then the Skylake desktop. This is basically the same as I'm still working on this, but this is the same as a shuttle, except you're not using the shuttle form factor. You're buying a regular motherboard, chucking an i7 in here, and going with the power supply and all that good stuff. So significantly, $400, $300 cheaper than the shuttle. But the shuttle, you're paying for convenience of the portability, and a lot of the stuff is pre-built. And also in this case right here, this particular motherboard, it only supports up to 32 gigs. So just keep that in mind. You can get, there's motherboards out there that will support 64 gigs on a Skylake for slightly more. You'll probably bump the price to like $1,100, $1,200. Questions about the sample build. And once again, I will share these out a little bit later. Okay, so my recommendation, if you have about $1,300, this is the one I go for. This is tried and tested. Tested. It's been verified to work. Works great with Windows 10. ESXi. Now you have to, when we get to the ESXi portion, you'll have to do some finagling to get that video card to work. But if, depending on the version of ESXi, it will probably work just fine, because it's a different chipset, but not a problem. It's got kind of the perfect amount of, you can put the M2, which can give you a decent amount of storage locally. You can connect up to 4 SATA drives, so you have expansion that way. It's got a gigabit, the Intel gigabit network card, so it's a pretty decent box, and it's portable, and you can carry it around. Oh, finally, this is another accessory I recommend to people. This guy right here, it's a carrying strap for a computer, and you just put this around the shuttle and you can carry it on to the airplane, because you'd be stupid to check it in. So I just carry it on the airplane, put it in the overhead, and or put it under the seat, you'll be fine. This is like, if you guys remember LAN parties, this is, a lot of people use these straps to carry their desktop computers and stuff. Okay, so for these spreadsheets right here, do these help you guys with like the detailed component listing and the links in purchasing the computer? Are these useful to you guys? What else do you guys need in terms of the build? And once I share this out, you can play with the numbers. For example, let's say you don't want as much RAM, you can change this. Maybe you find a better deal. This Core i7 price is 1414 right now. It's probably dropping. It's supposed to cost like 360, but the demand is so high that price is kind of up there. And of course, storage prices will drop over time. So this 1300 is right now. If you wait a couple months, may go down to like 1250, 1200. So open source Linux compatible builds, these will work just fine if you want to just stick with Linux. The Xeon D for sure will work with Linux. Any other questions? And I'll put detailed pictures of the shuttle and some of the other stuff so you can kind of look at it. Okay, so tomorrow we have our NSX meetup. We will also schedule Proxmox, the Unraid, and the ESXi meetups in the future. We'll also do the Windows 10 with the VMware Workstation in the future. So we got a lot of stuff planned. I'm going to share this out momentarily after I clean it up. And the video should be available, if I edit it quick enough, should be available either tonight or tomorrow. Thanks a lot, and I will see you guys later.